but when you've done that, like you haven't empowered the next use case.
Yeah.
And when you go with Element, you can build out what you need for one use case, but you've laid the foundation for the next use case and expanding out to everything else.
Yeah. Which is a harder sell because you're not solving RFP. Right.
Right. So, but the use cases are the hook, at least, for people to kind of come and ask a series of questions, from which then we have to do that kind of gross education on just actually it's nothing to do with your use case, it's more about your data.
Yeah.
I mean, it's also about the use cases. So if we look at, like, Lyondell wrote this data lake RFP because they managed to put together a lot. I mean, I think they managed to put up, I think it's 8 like good use cases that they like strongly were motivated in, and then there was maybe like I think another 10 like, these don't have that much business driver, and if you look at that, it's hard to issue an RFP for like numbers 9 through 18 on that list, right? Yeah. But people still want that.
Yeah.
And even if it's 5 guys at one plant who want this thing, they're never going to get it.
Yeah.
Right? It's low on that RFP list if people keep buying point solution by point solution.
And you have to give credit to Lyondell, even though we are frustrated by how sometimes backwards thinking they are. The fact that they saw that there is a commonality across all those use cases is pretty powerful, because not everyone realizes that. Everyone is going out saying, all right, I need this use case. Like, and that's what I was getting at when you asked me, okay, why buy Element? It's like, well, you want to enable its digital transformation. Not everyone thinks like Lyondell and says, I have 18 use cases and that's my digital transformation, or the start of my digital transformation.
Yeah.
Everyone thinks about saying, well, I have this one use case, can I make that use case work? I have this other use case, all right, what's the technology to make that use case work? And that's a huge challenge for us, but I think somehow up-leveling the conversation and say, well, you have this one use case and you have an RFP or whatever it is for that use case, but what you actually are getting is like these 8 or 18 or 100 different use cases that are being thrown at you, and you don't want to spend 6 to 18 months just to enable that use case and do a big data integration effort to do that. You probably should do that effort once, and then now you can go off and spin on like 100 different applications that you need, and let everyone kind of be much more self-serve about this. And it's a complete shift in mindset, which is a hard thing to sell, but we enable that to give the IT person more power.
Yeah, and so the devil's advocate, like the counterpoint to this, right, is people saying, okay, well, why aren't I in a position to do that today? I have all these source systems, right? So if I'm someone like BP, I've got Pi East and Pi West, where I've got essentially all the tags that I think are, in the first, 90% of importance, being aggregated up to 2 systems. Those are on my business network. And then I've got SAP's on my business network. So any authenticated user can conceivably go get data out of these systems running across the business network. The problem is, you actually don't just have 3 systems, right? You've got 100 systems, right? And that's something I think people kind of like fail to appreciate, is that these next tier use cases that are a little fuzzier, you're going to be sprinkling into more systems, and you're either going to capture the data network effects by building a data lake, building a well constructed data model on top of the data lake, or you're not, and you're going to still end up spider webbing, crisscrossing. This application needs data from here, there, and everywhere.
Yeah, what do you mean by going from 3 data sources to 100 data sources?
Well, so if you you add a new use case, right, and suddenly it needs to like process. It needs to look at P&IDs, right? It's like,
if we're seeing that pattern, we should probably be talking about that thought leadership, because these are the leaders of how we're doing it. Whether it's a graph or not is separate.
It's
right?
it's more subtle, right? It's more like, to be honest, like whatever we do about graphs, I think is just as valuable for us, like potentially like attracting engineers
Yeah.
as it is about selling the product.
Yeah, I think the fact, like, if we are talking about, you need one platform to help spin up your 50 plus initiatives, that you own, that is a much more compelling thought leadership, because very few people are thinking like that. Like I was saying, like Lyondell is unique in the fact that they actually said, I have these 18 initiatives and I should buy one platform to enable those 18. Most other folks you talk to, they're like, oh, I need a connected worker thing. Like if you're on the LNS call, the LNS call was like, all right, companies are coming and asking us for a connected worker. Companies are asking us for what's the platform for remote operations. Companies are asking us what's the application for remote monitoring. Companies are asking us for what's the application for edge-based ML models. It's like, okay, great. Well, you can buy one platform that enables all of that. And you don't need to go off and spend 24 months to enable each of those initiatives.
You still need to buy the
Yeah.
tools for them or whatever,
Yeah.
but I think, you know, one of the lessons of POA was that this tool is built, and are you getting value from it?
Yeah.
Are you using it? Are you rolling it out? And that same story is going to be true, right? Because we see, you know, people love piloting new shiny things, right? So people love piloting like connected worker and AR headsets and things like that. But at some point, there's this. The bigger the company is, the bigger the grind is to level up the whole organization and roll these things out.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to that air traffic controller blog or whatever I wrote. I was just saying, like, you look at any of these initiatives, and it's like at least a 16-month project. And you have all this consternation between IT and operations and trying to figure out how do you transform the data and get the data into a clean format and converting it over and going through all this project, and then that stifles any sort of innovation because you have to justify the ROI on that project because you just took away 16 months at least of IT resources, right? Like BP POA took them, before we got involved, it was taking them, I think they were an investment 3 years before we got involved or something like that, right?
A long time, yeah.
And so each of these projects there's like a high ROI, but they're investing, the reason why there's such a high ROI that they need to justify is because it requires so much investment to get it up and running. Now, if we could reduce the barrier on that substantially, because we're able to spin these things up by 30x, like they speed it up by 30x as far as your ability to deploy. Now, the sort of ROI barrier on any sort of analytics initiative went way down, and you can start to get a lot more smaller returns as well as the bigger returns really quickly because you can go after all these initiatives. And I don't think technology leaders or operational leaders or anyone like that is thinking that way because they're stuck in the mindset of 10 years ago where you justify a purchase based off of what's the ROI on it, is it solving a use case, what are the things that you need to enable that use case, and so on. That's how their buying cycle has been, and that slows things down dramatically.
Okay. Is a good word to describe that whole different approach to building solutions? Is it agility? Do we give people the agility to be able to move from one use case to another use case to another use case?
Yeah, I think so. One of the big things is we give people reuse, right? We give, so the context that people develop, they get to is shared, right?
Yeah.
And it's starting to allow people to go after these multiple use cases by just having something on the checklist just not be there anymore, which is like define what data is needed, define what source systems contain this data,
right,
migrate this data to where it needs to be, right?
Yeah.
Like that step in the checklist on any new project that involves data at all is just, we're hopefully like eliminating those or making those so obvious.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we can solve 100% of a use case here, and when this team spins up a different use case, we may have lessened their burden by 50%, because a lot of that stuff has already been.
I would recharacterize on that. I would not say that we solve 100% of one use case. We probably solve 50 to 60% of the use case, and you buy a separate product to enable the rest of the use case. And then because we did that for that one product, now 50 to 60%, maybe say we've already done 40% for the next use case, and we've done 40% for the next use case, and so on. And so that reduces the burden of the investment that you need to make in order to turn on that application. That's part one. I think agility, when I think agility, I think of agile methodology. In a way, you're also enabling an agile methodology with analytics, because you're allowing folks to quickly get something, an insight up and running, and then if that works, then you put that to production, and you listen to what the reaction is, and you modify that, and you start to create a much more reactive way of developing analytics, as opposed to all this planning and all this upfront work and whatnot. And I don't know, just like if you look at, I'm going on a tangent, but if you look at Clay Christensen's disruption theory, one of the reasons why companies slow down is that they use analyses too much to justify an investment in a new area or justify research, because the ROI is always got this high barrier that in order to create disruption, you need to justify the ROI, and any nascent idea, it'll never have the ROI to do that. And by us saying that the amount that you need to invest to actually get a return on that has dropped down by 40-something%, that is huge, because now you can actually start to come up with newer ideas that don't require as much upfront investment, and actually produce a return on all that stuff.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting spin on this, where there's like, say your company wants to adopt an advanced analytic from a vendor, right? The first thing the vendor is going to come and do is tell you that they're also selling you a consulting project, where they're essentially taking something that they already have, their analytic product, Uptake, Site Machine, whoever, and then the consulting project is the implementation and rollout of it, right? And that implementation and rollout of it, the most important thing is identifying all the data that exists and plumbing it to the right spots, right? At the very least, we've solved the company-owned part of that problem for people. Or once people have invested in Element and used it, right? They've gotten a good stab at that, right? And there's lots of other people coming in the marketplace, and it's not going to be one analytic application people buy. People can buy lots of analytic applications. We've seen this over and over again from people at Exxon, people at BP, and people are also going to do things themselves, right? People are going to do more and more themselves. So they're having the Element platform is very open with the data lake, and we have to work on some pieces, but and it's much friendlier than keeping the data essentially in a proprietary system that the customer doesn't really have ownership of.
Yeah. Do you have any other questions? We've been here all the time.
Yeah.
It's good. 5:15. But I mean, at the end of the day, I think the thought leadership is we reduce the investment required for any analytical effort. That is, and we can say we reduce that investment by, I would conservatively say 40%. And I think that's a pretty powerful statement for any company that's trying to think about this.
Yeah, I think we've done a good job of being like, what's the thing that CEO is thinking of? I have a whole crap load of initiatives.
Yeah.
Let me reduce the cost of all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so try and rationalize my...
Was there any other question that you wanted?
There's lots, but this was great to kind of just peel off into something that we went deep on. So